Greetings to you all. My name is Umi. Thank you guys for tuning into my YouTube channel. I know this video is a little late, but homeschooling has started for me and it is very time consuming and mildly stressful. So let's discuss Pluto and Capricorn transiting your 7th house. And this is the house of our most sensitive and most vulnerable experiences, because this is the house to do with relationships and partnerships and contracts. And with Pluto here, we're not talking about just any contracts. We're talking about soul contracts. We're talking about very deep and complex relationships. Pluto transiting this house would have definitely brought about an ending in some area of your life to do with your relationships, such as your business partner. Maybe you guys had a falling out. Business went down, or there was some strain on your relationship that ultimately for you may have resulted in some type of loss. So throughout this transit, what we're intended to experience with Pluto here, because it's very deep and reflective and penetrating, is what is our relationship with ourselves ultimately, and how we express that. As they say, when you love yourself first, and you open the way for others to love you and for you to receive that love from other people. So as almost, cheesy as it sounds, like, oh, self-love and loving myself and inner peace, it's actually a very real necessity in your self-expression and your communication with other people. Because when you have some measure of self-hate or prejudice, or you're cynical when it comes to relationships, like relationships never work out and people are liars, and this transit would have really forced you to go within, to really look at yourself, to see your hand in sabotaged relationships, to see your hand in compromising and sacrificing your true values for another person. So people with Venus and Scorpio can tend to be these heroes where they want to rescue people who have, major issues in their lives sometimes, whether it's financial, or these people struggle with some type of addictions or other issues, and you may want to jump in there and save. So Pluto, for you in your 7th house of relationships, could have introduced you to relationships that weren't good for you, but it was in order for you to go through this transformation of seeing why it wasn't good for you and why you kept living out this cycle. So you may have attracted people that, were even abusive or manipulative or controlling or domineering, or, who stalked you. You could have attracted people during this transit who made you feel unsure about who the hell you were. Because what's needing to be unearthed in you is the truth of who you are, and it has to come through your relationships. So if you were someone who's always gone at things alone, and you're okay with being alone, you're okay with dealing with life's challenges on your own, you don't need other people, your pride would have taken a real blow as well during this transit, so that you see the need for relationships and healthy and wholesome relationships. So some form of trauma may have manifested that would allow for greater appreciation and greater value in your relationships. And this, of course, could extend to relationships with your mother or father, if there's transits, aspects to the 4th house or 10th house. If the sun is in this house as well, during these transits, then you'll feel this need to reevaluate some of your closest, most interpersonal relationships. And the relationship you're currently in, if you're in a relationship now with your partner and things seem to be okay, or they've plateaued, or things are just at a standstill and you're not sure which direction or which way you're going in your relationship, as this transit comes to a conclusion, remember this is a long-term transit, and it's teaching us and allowing for transformation in this area of our interpersonal, style of relating to people and communication, and our relationships, business partnerships, contracts, marriage. So as we're rounding out these last several years with this transit, you may find that a marriage comes to an end. And I'm not saying that to speak negatively or to bring about fear, but remember, Pluto is a very raw and real energy. And so, there's no way to sugarcoat this transit either. It's usually going to bring about loss, or even trauma, or very difficult situations to do with our relationships that could, essentially result in a marriage being terminated, or you thinking that there was a marriage in place for you, and Things come to the surface pertaining to your partner that maybe the relationship is not very equal or balanced. You're giving very much of yourself and your time and your energy, and you're trying to keep a relationship or a marriage arrangement afloat, but it's not an equal distribution of energy and intention and love and resources. And so you may find that the universe is terminating this relationship, or you're feeling snatched from this relationship, or some unexpected event during this transit has brought things to your realization pertaining to an unhealthy relationship that you're in. So Pluto is going to retrieve things in us from the depths of who we are. It's not going to be a mundane, surface level kind of transit where you just have a few in and out relationships and you didn't really notice the impact. With Pluto here, you will notice the impact of Pluto's energies in your relationships. As I mentioned, you may be the one that is manipulative and controlling and domineering, and all of your phobias and fears and obsessive behaviors may manifest during this transit. Because if you have if you identify strongly with your relationship, like this is how you identify yourself, is with this partner and the plans you've made for your lives, and your sense of confidence and well-being, even, and self-esteem and identity is tied up in your relationships, then you may suffer even some mild form of an identity crisis during this transit, because Pluto is helping you to see from a more objective perspective, or just to kind of observe who you are and how you interact in your relationships and project yourself in your relationships. And so you may be witnessing your hand in self-sabotaging, your relationships, or you may witness your behaviors or attitudes towards your relationships in a much different and more radical way that will humble you, essentially. So moving forward, and after this transit, once you step into a new business partnership, you're going to have a respect and an appreciation and a value of an equal partnership, and how you need to behave and how you need to project yourself in that relationship. So if there's some deep underlying wounds that you've had to resolve to do with maybe feeling powerless, when you were younger, or feeling powerless in your relationships, and Pluto here is helping to empower you to speak up, to empower you to voice your needs, to empower you to say, hey, this is not equal, what's going on here? I feel that boundaries are being crossed, or I'm being, exploited, or I'm being used and abused. You may find the gusto, the inner force in you to speak out against what is not good for you in your relationships. And before, if you went years of just allowing things to happen, then you may feel the karmic, kickback of that, where, you may have gone through bouts of feeling worthless, feeling undeserving of a good marriage mate or a good partner. But certainly, where there's endings, there are beginnings. Pluto is about rebirth and regeneration and transformation. So moving forward, you will be not only more empowered about how you approach and observe your relationships, but you're going to know how to check yourself, and whatever humbling experience you've gone through during this transit is going to help you to be a bit more cautious moving forward with other individuals, and how you trust, how you let in, how much control you allow others to wield over you, and how much control you implement in your relationships. But it's a healthy amount of control. We all need to exercise self-control, in our daily living, and your relationship is going to reflect back to you how well you're managing this control. Are you over exercising this control because you're authoritative in this area now of relationships, where you can be too domineering, too aggressive about what it is you want, and that in and of itself can deter people from wanting to draw close to you. So although Pluto is magnetic, and speaking of Capricorn, I haven't mentioned yet how Capricorn is influencing all of this, but with Capricorn, that energy being it's a bit more reserved of an energy, you could have found that your desire to, accept new relationships or open up to new relationships was a bit slow, because Saturn rules over Capricorn, and this energy can be cautious, it could be conservative, it could be a bit stiff, it could be apprehensive, it could just be slow to really read into a thing and make even decisions at times, because Capricorn doesn't like to take unnecessary risk. During this transit, you may have felt a bit cautious in moving forward with relationships and prolonged decisions in marriage. And as it pertains to contracts, Pluto certainly could have brought up old soul connections and old soul contracts, and even recent contracts, contracts you've entered into. And to be more specific, by contracts, I mean sexual contracts, people that you've been intimate with, that you formed some type of connection, soul tie, or entanglement with these individuals during this transit. You may be really having to purge and shed, any attachments and what's another word for it? Any energies that are lingering in your auric field to do with past relationships and karmic relationships and traumatic relationships, unhealthy, sad, depressing, emotional, draining relationships from your past have been lingering in your aura for quite some time. And during this transit, you would have or are still going through a process of doing some emotional cleansing in this area of your relationships and experiences you've had with other people. And on a more collective level with Capricorn here, this is helping us to broaden out how we connect even with the outer world, because our relationship with the public is a real relationship. We tend to kind of exclude the severity of our impact when we're dealing with social media, like our comments, our support, our encouragement, our engagement with other people, and how it is that we express our connectedness to the outside world. So during this transit, not only are you forced to look at the internal, the relationship you have with the inner man, you're also forced to look at your relationships with external people, lovers, friends, business partners, and also the greater public. So this 11th house, socialization, community, and outer connections, if you have aspects to the 11th house, then this could bring up, issues or concerns you may have about connecting with the outside world. So Pluto can also make us feel isolated and secluded and cut off and cold and dark. So when it comes to entanglement and soul entanglement as it pertains to these contracts related to the 7th house, you may find that you're wanting to isolate or cut off people, and this desire or aversion to dealing with other people or entering into relationships is this form of self-preservation that arises in us with this Pluto energy, where we want to preserve our sanity. We want to keep, our deepest, most emotional feelings either a secret or closed off or just protected in a way. And because of that, you may have found yourself being a bit cold, cold-hearted, or, deciding, I want to be alone, F everybody, relationships aren't for me. So because this transit started so many years ago, you maybe can or can't even think of situations where you've cut people off or your relationships have really suffered and ended in a negative way. But if you still have a recollection of these bad relationship experiences, draw from that lessons so that moving forward, you're setting yourself up for a successful relationship, meaning you're not hiding anything. The relationship is not based on secrecy and mistrust and wounds and traumas from the past. So this energy can absolutely help you to recover from past traumas and wounds, because Pluto, although it's about that symbolic death, whatever beliefs or ideologies you had about relationships and how you interact with people in the past, all that may go through this complete radical, death of, I don't believe that anymore. I don't trust that way of thinking anymore. It hasn't served me. Or now with this Capricorn energy, you're setting up boundaries for yourself. You're more disciplined in how you show up for relationships and how you allow other people to, reciprocate and show up for you. You're more strategic even. Capricorn can make us strategic. It can make us to be a bit more, honest with ourselves in a very humbling way, because if we're about progressing and achieving goals, which is what this Capricorn energy can signify, then in our relationships, we're going to need to establish, goals for our relationships and work toward those goals. So that Capricorn energy can help you to realize what changes you need to make and actually work toward it. So in the next 3 years or so, you'll find a huge shift in how you approach relationships, what contracts you're willing to enter into, like literal contracts with business, with day-to-day, responsibilities and management of, life stuff, those kind of contracts. And then you have contracts that are soul contracts. You have contracts that have to do with our purpose, and fulfilling those contracts. And so being married to the game, we've all heard that in music when people talk about their commitment and dedication and loyalty to their career, in the music industry. So likewise, we can have this commitment and loyalty and dedication to a partner, you know, a lover, and those, you know, our marriage mate. And for some of us, there it could be a lot of strain and a lot of tension in these relationships, and it can go through a lot of turmoil. If you are someone who's been married since the beginning of this transit, 2007, 2008, you would have really undergone, you know, huge, like you maybe would have even put your partner through a tremendous amount of test, knowingly or unknowingly, to test their loyalty, because Pluto is kind of like, I want to know who's willing to ride or die with me. And it's not on a, like, you know, you're going to hold me down, like this sort of, no, it's a very deep and serious, when Pluto is referencing to death do its part, you know, ride or die, you will look for someone who carries this like apparent energy of they're going to be with you till death, or they're going to ride with you, or they're going to go through anything with you, or they're there for you. So you may have attracted someone or have someone that's still around in your life that has seen you through difficult times, you know, jail, breakdowns, issues with your parents, you know, quitting your job, not having a place to stay. There may be someone that's been around with you through all of the shit you've been through. And the seventh house, Pluto transiting your seventh house here, would have, you know, really brought it to your attention. Who's in your corner? Who's supporting you? Who's riding with you? You know, who's helping you to undergo all of this transformation in your relationships? Because there's usually somebody there to support us during these changes, even if they're not there throughout the whole transit. When we go through our changes and shifts in our relationships and partnerships, interestingly enough, it's like the universe will either send someone for us, whether that's a literal person that we know that can sit with us, or we reach out and meet people online or in forums or on platforms like YouTube, where you meet someone who can help you through your transition, can help you through this transformation in your life. But ultimately, you're needing to assess yourself to really find out if what you're contributing in your relationship is being reciprocated, and there's this sort of equal distribution of spiritual energy, mental energy, emotional support, you know, your needs and necessities of daily living is provided. These are basic core things that we can identify in our relationships that lets us know the relationship is going smooth, it's healthy, it's balanced. But if you're overextending yourself for a partner, or you're putting up with some abuse, or you're not setting up boundaries for yourself, where people are taking advantage of you or exploiting you in some way, or you're the individual doing it, that with Pluto here, you know, certain hidden agendas and intentions and obsessions and, you know, stalking and all of this stuff can manifest with this energy in the seventh house of relationships. So you may be forced to look at yourself, you know, what part are you playing in improving your relationships? Because if you're still blaming other people, your ex-wife, this happened, the girlfriend I dated from years ago, she did this to me, and you have this narrative about why your relationships are the way they are, then you are going to have to look at yourself and really assess relationship with self. So this transit can certainly manifest a host of various scenarios depending on your personal natal chart. If you would like to delve more into your personal chart, you can shoot me an email or book a session. That information is down in the description. So if you currently have Pluto in Capricorn transiting your seventh house, please share your personal experience. You never know who you may inspire or benefit with your insights. So thank you guys so much for tuning in, and until next time, peace.